The east wind howled through Willow Creek, biting cold like a blade against the skin. Under the flickering streetlights, Caleb, 20, pedaled his old bicycle, sweat beading despite the freezing weather. One last pizza delivery. If he was late, he'd lose his rundown room, the only shelter he had from the harsh streets. Suddenly, the trembling figure of an old woman appeared at the bus stop. Her white hair disheveled, her hands clutching an old cloth bag, muttering incoherently. Helping her could cost Caleb everything, but her desperate eyes made him hesitate. A small decision, a fateful moment could change his life forever. Follow this emotional story. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any meaningful moments. The late winter wind in Willow Creek was biting, howling through narrow alleys as if to swallow every weak glimmer from the dim streetlights. Caleb, 20, pedaled his old, creaky bicycle, each revolution a reminder of his tough days. The bike, his mother's last memento, was his only comfort during nights spent delivering pizzas to keep his shabby room. His thin jacket was torn at the shoulder, the cold seeping into his skin. But the clock was the real enemy. 8 minutes left to deliver the last order, or his landlord would kick him out without a second thought. Under the faint light of the bus stop, Caleb suddenly spotted an old woman, her white hair disheveled, her worn wool coat clutched tight around her trembling body. She stood there, her small hands gripping an old cloth bag, mumbling as if searching for something in her memory. Garden Street or Willow Lane? Bus number 14. No, 12. Her voice was shaky, lost. Caleb stopped his bike, his heart pounding. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but full of concern. The old woman looked up, her cloudy eyes flickering with a glimmer of hope. I don't remember. My house, it has a white fence. But I don't know the way home." Caleb glanced at his watch, a cold sweat running down his spine. Every second passing was a step closer to losing everything. But looking at her, he remembered his mother, who used to say, "Kindness is the only flame that never goes out." "Just take it easy," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "My name is Caleb. I'll help you." "What's your name?" The old woman offered a faint smile. "Margaret. Margaret. You're so kind, young man." Caleb helped her sit on the cold stone bench, placing the hot pizza box beside her as a promise. He asked more questions, but Margaret's answers were disjointed, only repeating white fence and the road with willow trees. He took a deep breath, making a risky decision. "Ma'am, I'll take you to find it. If you remember anything, just tell me." He helped Margaret onto the back of his bike, tying her cloth bag to the basket. The streets of Willow Creek were shrouded in thick fog, houses with closed doors like indifferent ghosts. Caleb pedaled, his breath turning to smoke in the air. "Ma'am, the white fence, is it near the park?" he asked, hoping for a clue. I think so. There's a big willow tree. I used to sit there." Margaret replied, her voice choked. Caleb nodded, but his heart felt heavy. He remembered the park on Willow Lane, but it was at the very end of town. Time was running out. Suddenly, a truck whizzed by, almost knocking him over. Margaret gasped, clutching his jacket. "Be careful, young man. I don't want to trouble you." Caleb forced a smile, sweat dampening his forehead. "It's okay, ma'am. I promise I'll get you home." But inside, he was fighting a fierce battle. If he didn't deliver the pizza on time, he'd lose his room, lose everything. But abandon Margaret in the cold night, he couldn't. He remembered a time his mother sold her wedding ring to buy him medicine, even though it was her most precious possession. "I don't regret anything as long as you're well," she used to say. Thinking of that, Caleb tightened his grip on the handlebars and pedaled harder. After almost an hour, his legs ached, his breath ragged. Willow Lane appeared, blurry in the fog. A house with a white fence emerged, a light spilling from the window. Margaret cried out, her voice choked. "That's right. This is my house." "Oh, young man, thank you." She took Caleb's hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You don't know what you've done. I won't forget." Caleb smiled, but his heart sank. The clock had ticked past the deadline. He knew his boss wouldn't forgive him. As Margaret stepped into her house, Caleb turned his bike around, the streetlights illuminating his solitary back. In his pocket, he found a small piece of paper that had fallen from Margaret's bag. An old business card, with Margaret Ellison, and an address. He tucked it into his pocket, unaware that this tiny piece of paper would change his life. Pedaling back to the store, Caleb prepared to face the storm waiting for him, but inside, a small light glimmered. He had done the right thing, and that was the only thing that mattered. A thick blanket of fog covered Willow Creek that winter night. As if trying to hide any remaining hope, Caleb pedaled his old bike back to the pizza shop, his breath mingling with the biting cold air, forming fragile wisps of white smoke. The pizza box had long gone cold, and the clock on his wrist mercilessly told him he was over an hour late. He knew the consequences awaiting him. His boss, Mr. Frank, never tolerated mistakes. As Caleb pushed the door open, Mr. Frank's sharp gaze said it all. "You think this is a joke, Caleb?" he yelled, his voice echoing in the small shop. "Late on a delivery," customer complained. "And now you're standing here like nothing happened." The key to the room, handed over. Caleb silently took the key from his pocket. But before he could say anything, Mr. Frank snatched it and threw it into the corner of the room, where it hit the wall with a dry clink. "You're done. Don't come back here again." Caleb stepped outside, the cold biting into his skin like tiny blades. He tried to open his room door, but the lock had been changed, the iron door cold and unyielding like a final rejection. He stood there, under the faint streetlights, his bicycle propped beside him like his only remaining friend. He had nowhere to go, not a dime in his pocket, just his torn jacket and the memory of Margaret, for whom he had sacrificed everything to help. But inside he felt no regret. "I did the right thing," he whispered, his voice lost in the wind. He cycled aimlessly through the deserted streets of Willow Creek, the lights from houses serving as reminders of a home he'd never truly had. His legs ached, his stomach growled with hunger, but he didn't want to stop. Stopping meant accepting defeat. Then he remembered old Amos, an elderly mechanic at the end of town who had once lent him tools when his bike tire went flat. "He's kind," Caleb thought. "Maybe he'll help." He pedaled to the small repair shop where a flickering neon light acted as a beacon in the darkness. He knocked on the door, his voice hesitant. "Mr. Amos, this Caleb. I don't have anywhere to sleep tonight. Can I stay here for a bit?" Mr. Amos, with his gray hair and oil-stained hands, opened the door, looking Caleb up and down. Wandering around in this cold, he asked, his voice low but not harsh. "Come on in. I don't have a fancy bed, but there's an old mattress in that corner. Just don't mess things up." Caleb nodded, feeling a weight lift from his chest. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. "I won't be a bother for long." Mr. Amos waved his hand. "Don't be silly. You look like you're about to collapse. Rest up. We'll figure it out tomorrow." In the corner of the repair shop, on a thin mattress smelling of engine oil, Caleb curled up, his body aching but his mind quietly at peace. He thought of Margaret, of the house with the white fence, and wondered if she was sleeping soundly. Helping her tonight had cost him everything, but it had also left him with a strange feeling, as if he had found a piece of himself. He drifted into sleep, unaware that on Willow Lane, Margaret was sitting by the fireplace, her trembling hands opening her old cloth purse. "That boy, Caleb," she murmured, pulling out a crumpled business card. "I have to find him. I can't let that kindness go unrewarded." She made a call, her voice firm. "Thomas, I need you first thing in the morning. There's someone I have to see." The next morning, as the first rays of dawn streamed through the repair shop window, Caleb woke to a persistent knocking. Mr. Amos mumbled something and opened the door. A tall man in a black suit stepped in, introducing himself as Thomas, assistant to Mrs. Margaret Ellison. "You're Caleb, right?" Thomas asked, his eyes scrutinizing. Caleb, his hair disheveled and eyes red from lack of sleep, nodded. "Yes, but how did you know I was here?" Thomas smiled. "Mrs. Margaret hasn't forgotten you. She says you did something no one else in this town would have done. Come with me. She wants to see you." Caleb was stunned, his heart racing. "See me? But I just took her home." Thomas shook his head, his voice deep. "You don't understand. She doesn't just want to thank you. She has something important to tell you." Caleb looked at Mr. Amos, who just nodded. "Go on, kid. Opportunity doesn't knock twice." He gripped his bicycle handlebars, his heart full of doubt but also glimmering with hope. As he stepped outside, the sunlight shone on his face, as if foreshadowing something big about to happen. He didn't know that this meeting would open a new door where his life would change forever. The morning light filtered through the high windows of Mr. Amos's repair shop, illuminating Caleb's face, still etched with grime and exhaustion. He sat up, his legs stiff from a night on the old mattress, the faint smell of engine oil in the air. His bicycle, leaning in the corner, its wheels caked with mud, was a silent reminder of his journey the night before. Before Caleb could fully collect himself, Thomas, the man in the black suit, stood before him, his voice low and serious. "Are you ready, Mrs. Margaret is waiting on Willow Lane. Don't keep her long." Caleb fumbled, running a hand through his messy hair. What should I do when I meet her?" he asked, his voice filled with doubt. Thomas merely offered a mysterious smile. "Just go, you'll see. She's not one to waste time." The sleek black car glided through the streets of Willow Creek, where the morning fog still clung to the ground. Caleb sat in the back seat, his rumpled clothes making him feel out of place. When the car stopped in front of the mansion with the white fence, he barely recognized the place where he had brought Margaret the night before. In the daylight, the house appeared magnificent, with white columns and meticulously cared-for gardens. He stepped out, his heart pounding, wondering what he was getting himself into. Thomas led him through a marble-tiled hallway where antique paintings on the walls seemed to follow his every step. Margaret sat in a spacious living room, the firelight casting a glow on her face, which was no longer that of the lost old woman Caleb had encountered. She wore an elegant wool cardigan, her silver hair neatly combed, her eyes shining brightly as if holding a long story. "Sit down, Caleb," she said, her voice warm but commanding. "I owe you a thank you, but it's more than that. I want to know about you." Caleb hesitated, settling onto a velvet armchair, feeling as though he were in a different world. I'm nothing special, ma'am," he replied, his voice low. "I just did what I thought needed to be done." Margaret tilted her head, observing him as if reading a book. "No one in this town would stop for a lost old woman, Caleb," she said. "You showed me something I thought I'd lost, true compassion." She explained that she had once been a philanthropist, running a fund to support underprivileged children before old age blurred her memory. Last night, Caleb's actions had awakened a part of her. "Do you know why I live alone in this house?" she asked, her voice softening. Caleb shook his head. Margaret looked out the window where willow branches swayed in the wind. "I once had a family, but they're gone. My son, he was about your age, always wanting to help others. You remind me of him." Caleb felt his chest tighten, not from pity, but from a strange connection. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am," he said, his voice sincere, "but I don't know how else I can help." Margaret smiled, placing her hand on the table where a steaming cup of tea sat. "I don't need you to help me, Caleb. I want to help you. Stay here, in this house. I'll take care of your education of a new life. You deserve it." The offer stunned Caleb. He stood up abruptly, shaking his head. "I appreciate it, but I can't accept. I didn't do it to be repaid." Margaret didn't waver. "This isn't repayment," she said, her voice firm. "This is an opportunity for both of us. I don't have much time, but I want to leave something meaningful behind. And I believe you can carry that further than I can." Caleb was silent, his gaze shifting between Margaret and the window. He remembered nights sleeping on the streets, days of hunger, and his mother's words, "Don't be afraid to take a chance, but always do what feels right in your heart." Thomas, standing in the corner of the room, spoke up. "You don't have to decide right away, Caleb, but Mrs. Margaret isn't one to joke around. Think it over carefully." Caleb clenched his fist, feeling the business card in his pocket as if it were warming up. "Give me some time," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I need to understand what this means for me." Margaret nodded, her eyes showing patience. "You know where to find me, but don't let pride blind your future." As Thomas escorted Caleb to the car, he handed him a small envelope. "She asked me to give you this," Thomas said. "Don't open it yet. Read it when you're ready." Caleb nodded, feeling as though he stood at a major crossroads. On the way back to the repair shop, he looked out the window. The streets of Willow Creek now seemed a little brighter. Inside him, a silent battle raged between pride and the hope of a new life. He didn't know that the envelope in his hand contained a short letter from Margaret detailing her unfinished dreams and her belief that Caleb could continue them. When the car stopped, Caleb stepped out, the sunlight shining on his face, as if to say that a new door was opening and all he had to do was dare to step through it. 1 week later, the pale early winter sun softened over the streets of Willow Creek, casting a gentle golden glow on the town. Caleb stood in front of the mansion with the white fence, his hands gripping the handlebars of his old bicycle, his heart pounding as if it would burst from his chest. He took a deep breath, knocked on the door, his heart full of both determination and anxiety. Margaret opened the door, her eyes shining like the fire in a hearth. "I hoped you'd come," she said warmly, leading him into the living room, where the scent of pine and chamomile tea wafted. Caleb stood there, his worn clothes still unable to conceal the light in his eyes. "I'm not sure I deserve this," he began, his voice soft but clear. "But I want to try, not just for me, but to do something bigger." Margaret smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've made the right choice, Caleb. We'll embark on a new journey together." In the days that followed, Caleb's life changed in ways he'd never imagined. Margaret not only gave him a warm room in the mansion, but also enrolled him in a community college, where he began studying nonprofit management. Late nights with books and notes replaced aimless wanderings under the streetlights. He still kept his old bicycle, riding through familiar streets, stopping at the bus stop where he'd met Margaret as a ritual to remember his journey. Each time he stopped, he looked at the flickering yellow light, feeling as though it was recounting the story of that night, the night a small act opened a grand door. One afternoon, Margaret called Caleb into the library, where towering bookshelves reached the ceiling and light filtered through the windows, creating long streaks of brightness. "I have an idea," she said, her hands clasped, her voice full of enthusiasm. "We'll establish a charity fund, called the Lighthouse Fund, to help young people like you, those who just need an opportunity to shine." Caleb was surprised, his eyes wide. "A fund? But I don't know anything about that." Margaret tilted her head, her gaze seeming to pierce through him. "You don't need to know everything now. You have your heart and your story. That's what matters most." Caleb became the primary coordinator for the Lighthouse Fund, using his experiences to find young people struggling in life's shadows. Once he met Lily, a 16-year-old girl living in an old car near the train station. She had sharp but wary eyes, just like his own used to be. "Why are you helping me?" Lily asked, her voice trembling as Caleb brought her to a support center. "Because I used to be in your shoes," he replied, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And someone gave me a chance. Now it's your turn." Watching Lily receive her new room, Caleb felt a profound joy, as if he was returning the flame Margaret had lit within him. The Lighthouse Fund grew, becoming a beacon for Willow Creek, supporting dozens of young people with housing, scholarships, and hope. Caleb, now 22, stood before a community conference, sharing his story. "I used to think I had nothing," he told the crowd, his voice resonating. "But a stranger saw me, and I learned that kindness can change everything." In the audience, Margaret, though her health was failing, applauded, her eyes shining with pride. Years later, when Margaret passed away, Caleb stood before the old bus stop, Thomas's business card still in his wallet, now worn at the edges but still precious. She had left him not just a home but a purpose in life. The Lighthouse Fund continued to thrive, and Caleb became a symbol of perseverance and kindness. He often returned to the bus stop, looking at the flickering streetlights and thinking about that fateful moment. "Life isn't about what you find," he murmured, "but what you build from the small things." Caleb and Margaret's story spread throughout Willow Creek, inspiring others to stop, listen, and act. A kind act, no matter how small, can be the spark that illuminates an entire life. Caleb, now a mature man, knew that home wasn't just a place, but the people you choose to walk with. And sometimes it all begins with a single moment when you dare to stop, see someone, and go further than you ever thought possible. The story of Caleb and Margaret in Willow Creek teaches us that kindness, no matter how small, can illuminate even the darkest corners of life. A moment of stopping, a simple act of compassion, can create a connection that transcends all boundaries, bringing hope and changing destinies. Caleb, from being homeless, found meaning in life by helping a stranger. And Margaret rediscovered light in her lonely days thanks to his empathy. This lesson reminds us to listen, see those around us, and dare to act. Have you ever experienced a life-changing moment due to kindness? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Every interaction from you is a flame that continues to spread beautiful values.